The text arrived like a cold blade slipped between my ribs. "We just want a peaceful Christmas with the family. Don't come." I stared at the screen while the kettle hissed, and the world outside my window went quiet beneath falling snow. My thumb hovered. My heart did that foolish flutter it still does for my son even now, and I typed, "Enjoy," then set the phone down as if it had burned me. In that moment, I understood how silence can roar, how a single sentence can knock a lifetime of Sundays and school plays and stitched-up knees off the shelves inside you. I sat at my kitchen table with the mug warming my hands and watched the flakes drift past the glass, each one an invitation to remember. 28 years of Christmas mornings rose like ghosts in the steam, waking at 5 a.m., basting turkeys, polishing my grandmother's china until the cups sang in the light. I thought, it can't end with a text, but the knot in my hands said it already had. The tree in the corner blinked faithfully, paper angels the grandchildren had glued together, stockings embroidered with names I whispered like a prayer. Anthony, Jessica, Emma, Jake. Even Jessica had a stocking, though last year she'd rolled her eyes when I brought out the photo albums and whispered to my son, "She lives in the past," as if the past were a shameful coat I should stop wearing. I opened the bottom dresser drawer and lifted the wooden box that smells faintly of cedar and rain. Letters. Anthony at 19. "Mom, thank you for the care package." Anthony at 23. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Anthony when Emma was born. "You'll be the best grandmother." I touched the ink like you touch a scar that has healed smooth and tried to find the seam where love turned into something to manage, where I became the inconvenient note that ruined their harmony. I told myself it started when Jessica arrived with her pedigree and winter white smiles, when my apartment became cozy in the way rich people say the word, when my homemade gifts began to look like thrift against their glittering excess. But the truth is, change rarely knocks. It moves in while you're doing the dishes. The phone rang and I jumped. "Anne, dear," Margaret from the penthouse said in that warm, fluted voice, "would you join us for Christmas dinner tomorrow? Cocktails at 6 p.m., dinner at 8 p.m., formal, I'm afraid." I heard myself protest, "I don't want to impose," even as the ache inside me reached for her hand. "Nonsense," she laughed. "Le Bernardin is catering and we need your sunshine." When I hung up, the mirror in the hallway held a woman of 65 with careful hair and department store black. A woman who had spent so long being useful, she'd forgotten how to be wanted. "Maybe it's time," I told her. "Maybe it's time to stop shrinking." I ironed the black dress I'd saved from the wedding and lifted my mother's pearls from their felt bed. Jessica texted a neat, efficient, "Thanks for understanding. The kids want a quiet Christmas." I deleted it and brewed another coffee, bracing myself against the old habit of apologizing for taking up space. Dawn slid into the room like a promise, and on a breath I hadn't planned to take, I opened my laptop and logged into an account I had never told my son existed. The number on the screen steadied me the way a handrail steadies a staircase. $8 million. Aunt Helen's final love letter to the only niece she trusted with the shape of a life. I had kept it secret so Anthony could become his own man. I had kept it secret because respect earned feels better than respect bought. I had kept it secret and they had dismissed me anyway. Snow kept falling. Somewhere across town, my family was arranging a peaceful Christmas without me. In my small kitchen, I cradled my mug and tasted the bitter edge of a new beginning. "You are not a burden," I said into the quiet. "You are a choice." Then I hung the pearls on the closet door, laid the dress beside them like a flag, and smiled for the first time that day. Margaret's door opened at exactly 6 p.m., and the first thing I saw was a chandelier that looked like a snowfall trapped mid-air. "Anne, you look radiant," Charles said as he offered his arm, and for once I didn't deflect the compliment. I let it land and warm me from the inside out. Their penthouse was a hush of soft carpets and city light, the kind of place where conversation moves like string music. People turned when Margaret introduced me, our dear friend Anne. Not to appraise, but to include, and the shock of being welcomed without audition made my throat tight. A curator asked what books I loved, a philanthropist asked about my neighborhood school, and a woman in a suit the color of thunder said, "Your perspective is exactly what our foundation needs." I heard myself answer, I'd be honored to help, and felt a click inside me as if an old lock had finally found its key. Dinner at 8 p.m. unfolded in quiet courses that tasted like patience. I told a story about stretching paychecks with coupons and library cards, and the thundersuit woman touched my hand and said, "That's strategy, not survival." I laughed, the soft, disbelieving kind, and realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had called my grit by its real name. When the desserts arrived like tiny sculptures, Margaret leaned close and confided, "You belong here." And the room tilted not with vertigo, but with rightness. I walked home beneath a sky still pricked with falling snow and set my shoes by the door like offerings to a future that had finally turned its face toward me. By New Year's Day at 10 a.m., I had done something I once would have called extravagant and now named ceremonial. I stepped into Tiffany & Co. and let a saleswoman fasten a slim watch around my wrist. "Cartier," she murmured, and when I handed her my black card and she poured champagne, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like a woman signing a contract with her own worth. A week later, at 2 p.m., I toured an apartment with windows that swallowed the skyline and signed papers with a pen heavy enough to anchor ships. I hired a trainer who arrived at 7 a.m. with kindness and a stopwatch, a stylist who said, "Let your shoulders remember they were built to carry joy," and a decorator who draped light on the walls as if it were fabric. None of it was about showing off. It was about unlearning the hunch. The foundation meetings began on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. around a long mahogany table overlooking the river, where my nameplate felt less like a prop and more like a promise. Anne understands the calculus families make when the power bill and after-school programs collide, the chairwoman said. And when she asked for proposals, I suggested funding literacy labs in working-class neighborhoods. The room hummed, pens scratched, and by 4:15 p.m. we had pledged $2 million to projects that would teach children to turn pages as if turning pages could turn lives. Walking out into the winter air, I realized I had become the woman I needed at 30, and the ache of that recognition was both grief and balm. The photos showed up before spring, me in a navy dress at a gallery opening, me laughing beside the mayor's wife at a benefit, me under a headline that read, "Anne Morrison, donor and advocate, champions education." I didn't post any of them. The world did it for me. At 7:20 a.m., one morning, Jessica's text arrived with a sweet glaze I didn't recognize. "Mom Morrison, hope you're well. Emma's spring concert is next week. She'd love to see you." 2 hours later, flowers as white as snowfall waited at my door with a card, signed by 4 names that had been silent since Christmas. I made tea and typed my own name into a search bar, then watched image after image make a mosaic of the life I'd been building quietly. "Ah," I said to the empty room when the pattern finally revealed itself, and the sound of my understanding was almost a laugh. The first call from Anthony came at 9:02 a.m., while I was in a plank and my trainer counted down with a grin. I let it ring. By 11:30 a.m., there were 5 missed calls. By noon, there were 9. By 1:45 p.m., there were 17. The voicemail stacked like frantic postcards from a city on fire. "Mom, please call me." Then, "We need to talk." Then, I saw the photos. When the phone lit up again and his name pulsed against the glass, I answered and said, "Hello, Anthony." The way you answer a door you now own. He breathed relief into the line, "Thank God," then stumbled, "Can I come over?" And I heard, beneath the paper of his voice, the scrape of a chair being pulled back to my table for the first time in months. I gave him a window. "I have 30 minutes at 11 a.m. And when I hung up, I stood very still in my quiet, sunlit kitchen and felt the hinge of the story shift toward whatever would come next. When the elevator doors slid open at 11 a.m., Anthony stepped out like a man arriving in a foreign country, eyes wide, shoulders uncertain. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in size, but in confidence, the kind of smallness that comes from realizing you've misjudged the terrain. His gaze swept over the marble floors, the tall windows, the artwork that glowed softly against the afternoon light. "This is incredible," he said finally, the words catching on awe. I smiled politely. "Would you like some coffee? My housekeeper made a fresh pot this morning." The word housekeeper seemed to echo off the walls. He blinked, as if recalibrating the image of his mother. "You have a housekeeper," he repeated quietly. "I have a life," I said, handing him a cup. He sat on the edge of the sofa, his suit wrinkled, his hands gripping the porcelain like an anchor. "Mom, I don't understand. Last Christmas you were in that tiny apartment. How is any of this possible?" I sat across from him, crossing my legs with the ease of a woman who owed no explanations. "It was always possible, Anthony. You just never asked." His confusion was almost childlike. "What do you mean?" "I inherited it 3 years ago from Aunt Helen." The silence stretched so thin I could hear the city humming through the glass. "How much?" he whispered. $8 million. The words hit him like a wind. He actually leaned back, mouth open, the arithmetic of our history rewriting itself behind his eyes. $8 million? Mom, why didn't you tell me? I stirred my coffee slowly. Tell you what exactly? That I had money you could borrow? That I could fix your problems before you learned how to solve them yourself? He tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway. "No, that's not what I meant." "It's what you meant," I said softly, not cruelly. He stared at me, cheeks flushed, a man seeing the parent he'd never truly looked at. "I just don't understand why you'd keep it a secret. Because I wanted you to respect me for who I was, not what I had. I thought if you knew, you'd stop seeing me as a person." I let that hang between us until it settled. "Turns out you did anyway." For the first time in his life, Anthony was speechless. He sipped his coffee, eyes darting around the room, as if trying to spot the mother he'd left behind somewhere in the corners. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "Mom, Jessica, and we're having problems. The business is struggling, the kids' school fees." I finished his sentence quietly. "You need help." He looked down. "I know how it looks, but I'm desperate. I can't lose the house. I can't." I raised a hand. "Anthony, I've been fixing your emergencies for 20 years. $50 here, $200 there, $5,000 for Emma's tuition. Always a promise to pay me back that never came. I have the records." I reached into a folder on the table and slid it toward him. His face paled as he skimmed the pages. $47,000, I said. "That's how much you've borrowed from me over the years." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't think you kept track. I didn't think you cared enough to ask. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly. I'll give you what you need for the lawyer, $50,000. But after that, we're done." His head jerked up. "Done?" "I'm retiring from being your safety net. This payment isn't a loan, it's severance pay." He looked stunned, like a man watching the ground open beneath him. "What if something happens? What if the kids?" "Then you'll handle it," I said gently. "You're 38 years old, Anthony. You can't keep living like the world owes you comfort." He stood, lost, hands in his hair. "But you're my mother." I met his eyes. "Yes, and for the first time in my life, I'm also myself." The clock on the mantel ticked quietly between us, marking the distance that had finally formed. "I'll have the funds transferred this week," I said. "After that, you decide what kind of relationship you want with me, and I'll decide if it's one I want too." He didn't argue. He just nodded, tears slicking the edges of his voice. "Can I hug you?" "Of course," I said, and let him. But it felt different. No longer the desperate clutch of a child needing rescue, but the tentative embrace of a man realizing the woman before him no longer needed saving. When the door closed behind him, I walked to the window. The city stretched below in glittering silence, the same city I'd once viewed from the shadows of a smaller life. Somewhere down there, Anthony was trying to understand who his mother had become. I sipped the last of my coffee and whispered to my reflection in the glass. She finally became someone worth knowing. 2 weeks passed before I called him again. 2 weeks in which my phone rang nearly every day. Anthony, Jessica, even Emma once, her voice trembling through the voicemail. "Grandma, please talk to Dad. He's really stressed." Each message carried the weight of a new urgency, but I let them pile up, one over another, like snow on a quiet street. I had spent decades rushing to fix things. This time, I wanted to see what happened when I didn't. On a soft Saturday afternoon around 2 p.m., I finally agreed to see him. I'd just returned from a weekend in the Hamptons with Margaret and Eleanor. The air still smelled faintly of salt and lilacs in my hair. I wore a linen dress the color of champagne and a calm that felt brand new. When Anthony arrived, he looked worn down to the threads, unshaven, shirt untucked, eyes red-rimmed from too little sleep and too much pride swallowed. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, hovering in the doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged here anymore. "Sit down, Anthony," I said. "We need to talk." He perched on the sofa's edge, hands clasped so tightly they blanched. "Mom, I know how this looks. I messed up. I treated you horribly. I thought—" I stopped him gently. "No, you didn't think. That's the problem. You expected." He looked down, shame pooling in the space between us. "I've realized a lot since Christmas," I continued. 40 years I spent making myself smaller so everyone else could fit comfortably around me. I worked jobs I hated, skipped vacations, bought clothes that hid instead of celebrated. And for what? So you'd have opportunities, so you could build a life that apparently had no room for me. His voice cracked. "I never asked you to—" "No, but you never told me not to either. You just took, and I kept giving because I thought that's what love was supposed to look like." He pressed a hand to his eyes. "Mom, please, I know I don't deserve your help, but the truth is, I'm drowning." I studied him. The son I had once carried in my arms, now grown but still searching for rescue. "And what happens after I pull you out this time? Do I just wait until the next wave?" "It's different now," he said, desperation rising. "I've learned my lesson. I know I can't keep depending on you, but right now I just need a chance to fix everything." I took a slow breath. That's what the $50,000 is for. It's a clean start, for both of us. He stared at me, confusion and panic warring in his face. "You mean that's it? No more?" "No more rescues, Anthony. No more pretending your problems are mine to solve." He looked so lost in that moment I almost softened, but then I remembered the ache of that Christmas morning, the text that had ended 28 years of family dinners. I owed it to myself not to step backward. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm just done being taken for granted." He nodded slowly, then whispered, "You really have changed." I smiled a little. I finally started treating myself the way I used to treat everyone else. He rubbed his jaw, swallowing hard. "What about Christmas this year?" The question hung heavy, fragile as glass. "That depends," I said. "Do you want me there because it would make you feel better? Or because you actually want me there?" His face crumpled, sincerity flooding through. "Because I want you there. Because I miss you." I believed him, but belief didn't mean surrender. Then show me, Anthony. Don't tell me. Respect isn't spoken, it's practiced. When he left, the apartment fell back into its golden quiet. I stood by the window again, the city reflecting in the glass, my reflection layered over it. A woman rebuilt from her own wreckage. My phone buzzed. It was Eleanor, inviting me to a gallery opening the next evening. "You must come, darling," she said. "Wear something bold." I looked at the skyline, at the world that had widened around me since I stopped apologizing for existing, and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt no guilt in choosing myself. 6 months later, the snow had melted. The city had shifted into spring, and my life had unfolded like a story I'd once only dared to imagine. The mornings began with sunlight through sheer curtains, the smell of coffee, and a quiet satisfaction I couldn't remember ever feeling before. My days were full. Board meetings, gallery openings, long lunches with women who spoke about purpose and art and legacy as casually as weather. I'd become Anne Morrison, philanthropist, a title that once would have embarrassed me but now simply fit. Every time I saw it printed beneath my photo in a foundation newsletter, I felt a little pulse of gratitude to the woman I used to be, the one who stayed up nights balancing bills, the one who kept believing there was still more waiting ahead. It was a Tuesday morning around 9:30 a.m. when my phone rang. I almost ignored it until I saw the name, Emma, my granddaughter. "Grandma Anne," she said when I answered, her voice bright and uncertain. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "You're never a bother, sweetheart. How are you?" "I just wanted to thank you. Dad told me about the college fund." Her voice wavered slightly, like she wasn't used to saying thank you. "No one's ever done something like that for me before." I smiled into the quiet. "You deserve every bit of it, honey." "It's not just the money," she said softly. "It's that you thought about me, about my future. You didn't have to." For a moment, I couldn't speak. All those years I'd been invisible in that family, and now, finally, someone saw me. "Grandma," she said after a pause, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happier now?" The question surprised me, not because she asked, but because she already knew the answer. "I am," I told her honestly. "I'm living the life I want instead of the one everyone expected me to live." "Is that why you don't come to family dinners anymore?" There it was, the question no one else had dared to ask. "I don't come," I said gently, "because I'm not invited the right way anymore." She was quiet, so I explained. For years, I was asked to come early to cook, to stay late and clean, to bring something homemade because your other grandmother was bringing something expensive. I was included, but never really wanted. And I decided I'd rather spend my holidays with people who actually wanted me there. There was another pause, softer this time. "Did we make you feel like that?" she whispered. "Not you, sweetheart, you were a child. But now you're old enough to make your own choices. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be." Her voice brightened a little. "Then I'm choosing to be the kind of person who calls her grandma just because she wants to." I laughed, the sound lighter than I expected. "Then I'd say you're already ahead of most people." That night, Emma came over for dinner. No noise, no tension, just two women, 2 generations apart, learning each other without anyone in between. She told me about her classes, her friends, the boys she liked. I told her about Paris, about the Foundation's new project, about learning to paint again. When she left, she hugged me tight and said, "You're cooler now than you've ever been." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled the wine. 2 weeks later, Jake called. 16 now, full of awkward confidence and quiet sincerity. "Grandma, Dad says you might not come to Christmas again this year." "That's right," I said carefully. "Can I ask why?" "Because I only go where I'm wanted." He was silent for a moment, then said softly, "What if I wanted you there?" I felt the sting behind my eyes before I could answer. Then we'll find a way to celebrate together. Maybe not on Christmas Day, but just us. Could you teach me that stuffing recipe you used to make? He asked shyly. Of course, I said, smiling. Come over Saturday, we'll start from scratch. And just like that, the bridge began to rebuild, not through guilt or obligation, but through small, honest moments. Saturdays became our ritual. Flour on the counter, laughter in the kitchen, stories about his father when he was young. I realized that love could still grow, even after disappointment, if you planted it in truth instead of expectation. Then one cold morning in November, my phone rang again. Mom, Anthony said quietly, I wanted to talk to you about Christmas. I braced myself, waiting for the guilt, the persuasion. But his next words disarmed me. I know you're not coming to our house, and I understand why, but would you be open to me coming to see you? Just me, on Christmas morning, before everything else? For a moment, I didn't breathe. You're not asking for anything? No, he said. Just time. I miss you. When Christmas morning came, the city was covered in snow again, the kind that softens every edge. Anthony arrived at 10 a.m. with a bag of pastries from my favorite bakery, the one I'd mentioned months ago, and a thermos of coffee. We sat by the window, watching flakes fall past the glass, and for the first time in years, we simply talked. About his business, his marriage, my foundation work, Emma's classes, Jake's cooking. No tension, no demands, just conversation. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. Mom, he said softly, I owe you an apology. Not just for Christmas last year, for all the years before that, for taking your love for granted, for never asking what made you happy. I smiled at him, really smiled. You just did. And for the first time, I believed we might actually start again, not from obligation, but from respect. That evening, after Anthony left, I stood at the window of my penthouse with a glass of wine, watching the city sparkle beneath a blanket of snow. The world looked so peaceful from up here, distant yet kind, like it had finally forgiven me for all the years I'd spent apologizing for wanting more. My phone buzzed again, not with need or demand, but with warmth. Emma sent a photo of herself volunteering at a shelter, cheeks flushed, smile radiant. Merry Christmas, Grandma. You inspire me. A few minutes later, Jake texted a picture of the stuffing we'd made together. Nailed it. I laughed aloud, the sound bright and easy. Then came a message from Margaret. Champagne at ours in an hour, darling. Bring your glow. For the first time, I didn't feel torn between worlds. I wasn't choosing one family over another. I was simply standing in a life I had built with my own hands, steady, proud, and free. I thought of the woman I'd been 1 year ago, sitting at that same kitchen table with trembling hands, reading a text that shattered her heart. She'd believed her story had ended that day. But endings, I've learned, are often just the first honest chapters of who we're meant to become. Later that night at Margaret's, the air hummed with soft laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Someone at the piano began playing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, and I felt an ache of gratitude so deep it stole my breath. Eleanor pulled me aside near the balcony. Anne, darling, she said, her voice warm and bright. I wanted to tell you the board voted yesterday. We'd like you to chair the education committee next year. For a moment, I just stared at her, blinking back tears. Me? She smiled. You've become the heart of this foundation. You know what matters. When I got home past midnight, the city was quiet again. I poured myself one last glass of wine and stood on the balcony, snowflakes catching in my hair. Down below, lights flickered in windows, families gathered around tables, laughter muffled by distance. Mine was somewhere among them, perhaps finally learning what I had come to understand, that love without respect is hollow, that being chosen freely is the only kind of belonging that lasts. I raised my glass to the skyline. "Here's to new beginnings," I whispered. And I meant it, not as a wish, but as a declaration. Because beginnings don't always wait for youth or perfect timing. Sometimes they arrive when you stop begging for a seat at someone else's table and realize you can build your own. Now, I'm curious about you, the one who's listened to my story until the end. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever had to choose yourself after years of being overlooked? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know how far my story has reached. And if it touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us it's never too late to reclaim our worth.